following program is sponsored. The opinions and statements made by the hosts and guests do not necessarily reflect the views of WBOB or its parent company, the Chesapeake Portsmouth Broadcasting Corporation.
WBOB AM 600 The Answer is proud to present Toula's Tips for Caregivers. Help is on the air with Toula Wooten, your source to go for resources and information to help you in this rewarding but sometimes challenging role. Toula's Tips for Caregivers is brought to you by AgeWell Institute at Baptist Health, by Elmcroft Assisted Living and Memory Care, by Apex Home Health Care, by the AARP, and by Bartram Lakes Brooks Assisted Living. To participate in today's show, call 904-222-TALK. That's 904-222-8255. Now here's Toula.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to my show today, Toula's Tips for Caregivers. For anybody who might be tuning in for the first time, my name is Toula Wooten, and my background is medical social work, always working with what I like to term our elders versus seniors, our frail elders in particular, and those who need any type of assistance. Currently, I work for Community Hospice of Northeast Florida, and many of you know me as the leader of the Caregiver Coalition of Northeast Florida, which I formed to help caregivers who are caring for a loved one. And I've been doing this radio show for about 7 years now to help those of you who are caring for a loved one access resources to help you in this sometimes very challenging role. Hopefully provide a little encouragement and inspiration to you, because I know it can be overwhelming at times. So I'm here, and today you're listening to a show that is pre-recorded in honor of our guest and of a schedule that I've got for this Saturday that you're listening. But I want to welcome Doctor Michael Solloway to my show. We're going to be talking about some pretty tough topics today, so I want you to hold on. Dr. Solloway is a geriatric psychiatrist with the Baptist Behavioral Health and AgeWell Center for Senior Health. He has been the medical director for the Baptist Behavioral Health for some time now. He's got an extensive background helping people with mental health issues. For over 40 years, he's been practicing. He's worked with youth at Daniel Memorial. Yes. And later opened up a resource center at the Mental Health Resource Center. He opened up a unit there, and then I guess you said in about 2000 you transferred to Baptist Medical Center?
It was exactly 2000, yes, that I went to work for Baptist.
And I know you're pleased to be there, and I know that Baptist Medical Center is dedicated to the overall health and well-being of people in our service area, but also to the mental health issues. And we do have to hand it to Baptist and to AgeWell for being willing to address this in our community.
Yeah, these are areas that are often neglected in other hospitals. They're not big money makers, but they are an integral part of good health, and they're very serious.
Well, Dr. Solloway, thank you for giving of your time today to come and talk about our topic today, which is depression in our elders. As someone who's worked with seniors and their family caregivers for about 35 years now, I think we might be close to the same age, I have an interest, too, in this topic, because I've seen it over the years, and I'm very saddened, to see our frail elders as they advance in years into what some would call should be some of their happiest years of life. They just really aren't.
The golden years.
Yeah, I remember that show, Golden Girls. It's not like that for everybody, is it?
It sure isn't. No. One of the things, though, that's interesting is that although depression in elders is often very difficult to treat, tends to be chronic, relapsing, the incidence of depression actually goes down as you get older, so that the incidence of depression in our elder population is probably around 4%. Some estimates bring it as high as 7%, but in the general population, it's much higher than that. So we've got we have fewer people that are depressed in the elder group, but the ones that are depressed often have a much more difficult time.
Again, that's kind of an alarming statistic, even if it is only 4 to 7%. Is depression a normal part of aging? Is it something you just have to expect as you grow older?
No, it absolutely is not at all a normal part of aging. And another thing that is a common misconception is that memory loss and dementia are normally expected in old age, and that's not true at all.
No, and I'm thankful for that. Then, if that's not the case, why do we as a society think that way? Why do we have this concept of our frail elders being depressed and having dementia? What is that about?
I'm not sure. I guess there's a little bit of ageism in there.
Yeah, I think that's very prevalent in our society. But, talking about depression in elders, I have a lot of caregivers out there who are caring for their family members, mother, father, aunt, uncle, grandparents, and a lot of them are caring for people who are 85 and older. And if you're caring for a loved one and you are thinking that maybe they're exhibiting some signs of depression, can you tell us what some of those signs might be that our caregivers should be looking for?
Well, yes. Depression is defined, first of all, by the fact that someone either is feeling unhappy, sad, almost all the time, almost every day, or, and it could be or, they're just unable to experience joy with anything. So at least one of those two things. So if you see that your mom or dad or whoever your loved one is beginning to withdraw from things, doesn't want to go out to dinner so much, is not so interested in seeing their friends, and doesn't seem to enjoy it, even when their grandkids come by, that's a big red herring. That's a big red mark to look for depression. The elders are a little bit less likely to sit around crying. Younger people cry a lot. Elders, not so much. Not that you don't see it.
Yeah.
Some of them do, and crying, of course, is a main marker. That's one of the things to look for. But it's mostly the withdrawal, the not being able to enjoy things that are going on. All depressions involve, to some extent, appetite. So when we have someone that is all of a sudden beginning to lose weight, even though you don't recognize that they're not eating as much, begin to look for it, and you'll find that they take a full portion, have a few bites, and that's it.
And they're done.
Yeah. And I've had a lot of patients that came in with their main complaint being, I'm losing weight. I must have cancer. I'm so concerned about that. And at the end of the day, after a big medical workup, everything is okay, and it's because they're depressed. And it's hard for me to convince them that if we get you over the depression, you'll gain weight. Don't worry about the weight.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things to look for. The other is sleep, of course. But that's a tough one because sleep is a complaint of almost every patient that walks in our doors.
Insomnia?
Usually insomnia, and very often they're people that are sleeping plenty. They're falling asleep a little later, but once they fall asleep, they sleep till 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock.
Yep. Familiar with that pattern myself. You are listening to Toula's Tips for Caregivers. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
George, I got the job. Thanks, I'm so excited. They hired me on the spot right after the interview. It was that book I bought from Amazon, From the Interview to the Paycheck by Fred Haley. The book really taught me something. It helped me to think about what the boss wants. Then it helped me with answers that show that I can do the job. I can tell they were impressed when I introduced myself. I just followed the simple outline from the Interview to the Paycheck book, and I know I won the job with my first 90 days plan the book recommended. They said no one else had ever been so prepared. You should get the book. It's on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle. It's worth it if you want to get hired. Just search for From the Interview to the Paycheck by Fred Haley. Do it now.
Hi, this is Toula, and I'm here to talk to you about Baptist's new AgeWell Institute. Are you caring for a loved one who's 65 or older? Are you a boomer like myself who's caring for a parent? And perhaps your parent has been experiencing some decline in their overall health. Let me highly recommend to you the Baptist AgeWell Institute. They have the only real geriatrician here in Northeast Florida who is able to look at the whole person. Their comprehensive approach includes a nurse, a doctor, a social worker, a pharmacist, a dietitian. They have their own physical therapy there. They can work with folks with memory disorders. My goal is to help you, the caregiver, find an organization that can care for your loved one who's 65 or older. I take my own parents there, and I highly recommend the AgeWell Institute at Baptist. Please give them a call at 904-202-4243. Again, that's 904-202-4243. You'll be so glad you did.
Have you read the new book, Love Stories and Timeless Tips yet? It's by our own Toula Wooten with Toula's Tips for Caregivers. Toula is a caregiver too, as well as an expert on caregiving. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle at Amazon.com. The book is filled with touching stories of caregivers taking care of their loved ones. Each chapter has helpful ideas that we all can use. I love that Toula included a Toula's tip with each story. Her message to caregivers is clear. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of your loved one. This is a beautiful book for all caregivers to read, whether you're a part-time, full-time, or long-distance caregiver, or someone receiving care. You should get the book today. Just go to Amazon.com. Search for Love Stories and Timeless Tips by Toula Wooten.
Have you noticed that mom or dad seems to be slipping a bit? Forgetting appointments, skipping meals, repeating stories? You know they're not ready for a nursing home, yet they could benefit from some kind of help. Brooks Rehabilitation invites you to redefine assisted living at Bartram Lakes. Bartram Lakes Assisted Living offers care and services for adults who value choice and independence, yet benefit from 24/7 support. Our residents embrace life, develop friendships, and live life to its fullest. Our residents' families benefit from having peace of mind, knowing that Brooks Rehabilitation, a trusted name in Jacksonville healthcare for 40 years, is overseeing their loved ones' care. Come and visit Bartram Lakes Assisted Living. To schedule a tour, call 904-528-3515. That's 904-528-3515. Or visit www.bartramlakes.org.
Hi, this is Toula. If the loved one that you're caring for has recently experienced any falls or had medication changes, maybe they've been hospitalized in the last 3 to 6 months, some new medical condition that's been diagnosed by the doctor, or just an overall change in their healthcare status, or difficulty in walking or bathing or eating, it's time to call Apex Home Healthcare Services. They can help you with all of the above. The number is 904-425-4202. That's 904-425-4202.
And now let's return to Toula's Tips for Caregivers, brought to you in part by AgeWell Institute at Baptist Health, by Elmcroft Assisted Living and Memory Care, by Apex Home Healthcare, by the AARP, and by Bartram Lakes Brooks Assisted Living. Once again, here's Toula.
Well, welcome back, everyone. If you've just joined me, my guest today is Dr. Michael Solloway, who is the medical director for the Baptist Behavioral Health Program and for AgeWell, where, as many of you know, I take my own parents. I did forget to mention in the first segment that even though this show is pre-recorded, if you would like to call in today, the producer will take your name and number and contact me during the week. If you have a question for Dr. Solloway, I'll be sure to get that to him, because this is a very important topic today, and so I don't want to leave you guys kind of just out there with not knowing how to follow up. We are talking about depression in our elders, and later in the last segment of the show, we're going to talk about suicide in our elders, because unfortunately, that's one of the demographics that's growing the fastest in, and that breaks my heart. So, Dr. Solloway, again, thank you for being here today. We just finished talking a little bit about some of the signs that caregivers should look for in their loved one, that their loved one may be depressed. Are the signs of depression similar to the signs of dementia, and how do you tell them apart?
Well, there are some signs that are similar, And sometimes they're caused by dementia, and they look like depression. One of the biggest is apathy, where the person suffering from dementia at some point may realize that they're not really with the conversation most of the time, and they're a bit embarrassed by it, and they would prefer to stay home. So they get a little withdrawn. It does not mean that they're depressed. Sometimes it's just a normal part of the dementia that people become quieter. Now, that's not everyone. Some people that are very gregarious, as their memory begins to fade, continue to be rather gregarious, and they'll talk about things that happened in the past, and that's great. It's more reassuring.
Yeah, it's enjoyable, actually.
It is. They also have difficulty with sleep. The sleep pattern is often disrupted, and it's pretty typical. It's usually that they stay up later and later, and then they sleep later and later. So it's not really a disturbance in the quantity of sleep. It's just the timing, and sometimes the quality. Excuse me. The other thing is that people with depression often lose energy. They just feel tired all the time. That can happen with dementia to a certain extent, not as often. And then the big one is motivation. People that have severe depressions have very little motivation. And one of the things that's hard on caregivers is that they know that their loved one is not getting any exercise, and they used to take walks, and they know that they'd feel better if they got the exercise, and they can't understand why they won't take that simple advice. And it's simply because they're too depressed.
Right.
They
It's
don't have
really
the
hard to
motivation.
get out of that cycle
Boy,
take that first step.
It sure is. And at that point, those are the people that really need my help. They need to see a psychiatrist and probably a psychologist as well, somebody that can talk to them. But medication becomes probably the key at that point to get them to the point where they're feeling well enough that they can, yes, go out and take a walk. And that helps.
Yeah.
That's another add-on that'll help with the depression.
You know, I tell people the older I get, the more I'm convinced that exercise really is kind of the cure-all for just about anything that ails you. If you are feeling down or sad or depressed, we know that exercise lifts your mood.
It does. And I'll tell you another thing. Exercise is one of the main important things that forestalls dementia. People that exercise are less likely to begin having signs of dementia.
You know, that's what I tell my husband every time I say, please go dancing with me.
Yes. That's a great exercise,
I
by
love
the way.
Latin and ballroom dancing. You know, my mind is thinking, I'm having to think about the next step, and I'm moving, and it's social. I mean, I think dancing would be a great thing for any frail elder who's capable of it to go out and engage in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I recommend that. There are other things, and what's important is that something else, as you said, a frail elder, because all of us lose some abilities as we get older.
Right.
And we have to exercise, but we have to do it. We have to be smart about it.
What we can do.
Yeah, do the things that help you and don't hurt you.
Right.
So, and there are a lot of them. Simple things like yoga. And a lot of yoga is taught in chairs, people sitting down, and not going beyond what their body can handle. Tai Chi is one that you hear about, where there's slow movements, and they're often done in a group. Yeah. So then not only are you getting the benefit of the exercise, but you're meeting new people.
And that always is helpful, because we all know that isolation will lead to depression. So you need to have a strong support system, family and friends.
You do. And as we spoke about a little bit earlier, it's not really the quantity of your support system. It's not that you have 20 or 30 or 40 or 100 or 200 friends. It's really the quality of the support system, the kind of relationship you have with them. So, and sometimes what happens in elders as we get older, and one of the things I always notice is that we lose a lot of people. People die. People move away. But for the people that are the healthiest, they turn towards the remaining parts of their support system and strengthen those ties.
Yeah, it's so important. And when you get right down to it, it's what matters the most in our lives. It's the people in our lives that we love.
Absolutely.
And maintaining close contact with those people. I like some of the advice that you've given, and definitely kind of the distinction again between the depression and the dementia, although some of the signs are very similar.
Yes.
And let's talk a little bit about the person who has dementia and is starting to feel depressed. What kind of treatment is? I'm kind of perplexed about that.
Well, they're similar. Let me say first of all that there are different kinds of dementia.
Right.
So people think of dementia and they think of Alzheimer's and think they're two separate things. One is worse than the other, and it's not true. Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia, but
Right.
it's just one form. There are a lot of other things. People with Alzheimer's, often when they are depressed going into it, often the depression begins to lift. It's a little easier to treat depressions in people that have Alzheimer's. Not all the time, but often.
Right.
People that have, say, vascular dementia, where the small vessels in the brain begin to clog off, and different parts of the brain are affected.
Mm-hmm.
Different parts of the brain, because they're not getting blood supply, actually die. Those people don't seem to improve when they get depressed, and it's very, very difficult to treat that type of person with dementia. So with the vascular dementias, depression is a big problem. What we treat them pretty much the same way. We have to use medication. In the people that are difficult to treat, frequently the common medications we use, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. So things, the common names, Prozac, Paxil, Effexor, things like that, they often don't work as well. And we end up using combinations with other medications. And sometimes none of it works, and we turn towards a new form of therapy that Baptist actually is doing here and has been doing for the last couple of years. Dr. Rafai is the chief of this, and it's called TMS, so it's transcranial magnetic stimulation, and it's a very interesting concept. I don't know how somebody figured out that it works, but it does.
Tell me about that. I'm not familiar with it.
Well, the patient sits in a very comfortable chair, and there's a sort of a quarter of a cap, and it's actually a magnet. It's an electromagnet, and it goes over a part of the head nearest to the activity centers of the brain that have to do with speech, feeling, and some movement. So they can exactly place that by turning it on and seeing if it's on the left side. If the right thumb moves, okay, we're in the right place.
Right.
It's a little more complicated than that, but that's.
Yeah.
Then they have to sit under that for 35 to 40 minutes, 5 times a week for 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah.
It's a long time, but it's often very successful, and it has absolutely no side effects. I shouldn't say none, because sometimes people feel a little tingling in their head, but that's about it.
That's pretty minor.
It's very minor.
And it's got great success rates.
It's got good success rates. It's got very good success rates, and sometimes they're lasting, sometimes they're not. I have a patient that I'm seeing right now that had TMS, and towards the end of it was totally free of depression, whereas going into it, she had every symptom of depression, and it was 3+ on every one of them.
And she's feeling better now.
However, she relapsed within about 3 weeks.
I'm sorry to hear that. I don't know. You're taking good care of her. You are listening to Toula's Tips for Caregivers on AM 600 WBOB. We'll be right back after this break.
Hewitt, Laura Ingram, Dennis Prager, The Savage Nation, Mark Levin, WBOB, AM 600. The Answer.
With SRN News, I'm Bob Agnew in Washington. Italy's finance minister is urging the European Union to do more than, quote, concern itself only about banks. He tells a Milan newspaper that deep dissatisfaction over immigration, security, and slow economic growth could combine for a further push toward disintegration of the European Union bloc. Leaders across the EU are mounting efforts to keep the union together after Britain's so-called Brexit vote this week. Hundreds of Kurds are fleeing villages controlled by the Islamic State terrorist group in the northern Syrian province of Aleppo. That's where mass abductions have been reported, and according to opposition monitoring groups, they say that some of those fleeing have come under fire or been killed by landmines. Flooding in West Virginia has claimed 23 lives. Authorities say a number of people are still unaccounted for in hard-hit Greenbrier County. The governor's office says scores of homes have been damaged. Many people are in shelters. This is SRN News.
Hi, it's Hugh Hewitt. Share your ride to work with me weekday mornings for interesting conversational talk here on WBOB. The Answer. We'll discuss topics spanning all the forms, plus take your calls, interview some of the biggest movers and shakers in the world of politics, the news you must have, the analysis you need, entertainment, and more. You can't be informed if you don't participate. That's the Hugh Hewitt Show, weekday mornings from 6 to 9 on WBOB AM 600, The Answer.
I'm Clayton Bromberg, the president of Underwoods. We were asked a question the other day about a store's reputation and how a customer might judge that. The first thing that came to mind was to look at how long they've been in business. Because if a store or a person is disreputable, that word will get out fast and that business won't be around very long. The second thing that comes to mind for jewelry stores, if the store has been in business a long time, there'll be a lot of folks in the area wearing jewelry from that establishment. And if they sell fine jewelry, you can best bet that those pieces have been shown thousands of times and probably passed down from one generation to the next, and a lot of people have been told where that piece came from. At Underwoods, it's our stated goal to be the best jeweler in the South, not the biggest, so everything we do in Cary has to move us towards that goal. And ultimately, it's satisfied customers wearing our jewelry that have kept Underwoods in business since 1928. So come by and see us in San Marco, Avondale, the Shops of Ponte Vedra, and the Avenues Mall.
This hour on WBOB, sponsored by Baker Glass.
Hi, it's Mac with Baker Glass. If you're having trouble finding a clear option for that new shower enclosure or a replacement for that fog glass, then call the Baker Boys or find us at BakerGlassInc.com. That's BakerGlassInc.com. Baker Glass, no one treats you better.
Hugh Hewitt, weekday mornings from 6 to 9. Laura Ingram at 9. Dennis Prager at noon. The Savage Nation at 3. Mark Levin at 6. WBOB AM 600. The Answer.
Trust. It's something that has to be earned. Without honesty, there can be no trust. At Stewart Automotive, they get that. When you bring your automobile to their shop, they repair only what's needed. At Stewart Automotive, their ASC certified technicians not only know how to repair your automobile, they know the importance of gaining your trust. Stewart Automotive. Call 992-6868. That's 992-6868. Online at StewartAutomotiveRepair.com.
Stuck in traffic? WBOB has the answer.
There's a crash that is blocking the right shoulder at 295 north at the Dames Point Bridge. Also, traffic is slow in that same area due to construction blocking the two right lanes. As for the weather, 20% chance of showers through tonight, mostly sunny this afternoon, highs of about 94. Looking for heat index near 100. It's currently 88 degrees right here at WBOB. AM 600, The Answer.
And now let's return to Toula's Tips for Caregivers, brought to you in part by AgeWell Institute at Baptist Health, by Elmcroft Assisted Living and Memory Care, by Apex Home Health Care, by the AARP, and by Bartram Lakes Brooks Assisted Living. Once again, here's Toula.
Welcome back, everyone. Although the show you're listening to today is pre-recorded, I do encourage you to call in if you've got any questions about the topic we're addressing today, which is depression in our elders and in the caregivers. We're going to get to that in just a few minutes. If you would like to call in today, please do so at 904-222-8255. I will make sure that the questions that you have or routed to me. And if they're for Dr. Solloway, I will certainly get them to him. And I know he will follow up, because this is important stuff we're talking about today. Depression is unfortunately more prevalent in our elders than you or I, as we were talked about, would like to see. And you treat it every day in elders. And we've talked a little bit about some treatment. We've talked about medication. We've talked about TMS, and you taught me something new about that today. What other forms of treatment are there when those don't work?
Well, the most effective form of treatment for depression remains electroshock treatment, electroshock therapy, ECT. It really went out of style, and not because of any particular thing that happened. The problem was that movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
It gave it a bad rap, didn't it?
It really did. It displayed it in a way that it's not done.
I know that. I remember those days. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's coming back, and when all else fails, ECT is often successful, and it's painless. Patients they're put to sleep, and it's very safe. Very safe. In fact, the biggest risk is that we have to put a patient to sleep, so there's some risk from anesthesia. Mm-hmm. The positive part is that they're asleep for a very short time, a matter of a couple of minutes. They're put to sleep so that we can give them something that relaxes their muscles enough so that even though it's supposed to be a convulsion, a seizure, the muscles don't move anything.
Right.
So but no one is hurt by that. No one breaks a bone. Right. There is a little bit of memory loss, and that happens surrounding the period of time that you're getting the treatments. After 10 days to 2 weeks after the last, almost all the memory is restored. There's some memory that you lose while you're doing it that you'll never get back, but
right.
It's not important. Right. What you knew before will come back. So it's still, for instance, I was talking about the patient that did well with TMS but then relapsed. We're going to try her on something else, a different combination of medications, and if that's not successful, we're going to recommend ECT. Actually, this is a patient that had ECT 40 years ago, and it was very successful.
Very good. So the success rates for this treatment are good, and it's good in our elders as well.
It's very good, and it's rather safe for our elders. It's safer than the medications we give them. In fact, there are fewer side effects. And it's, I think the success rate is around 80 to 85%, whereas with medications, we're talking maybe 60% or less.
So it's, in fact, better.
It's much better.
But you're right. Our society has an aversion to it right now, and so I'm hoping we can do some education.
Yes. And, of course, the other thing is that patients have the other option of talk therapy, and talk therapy along with medication is very effective and very important. And even for patients that have a degree of dementia where they're not able to learn, the relationship itself can be very healing.
Yeah. And, you mentioned before we came on the show, you referred to yourself. I don't want to use the word elder, but I think you did refer to yourself.
I am an elder.
As an elder. And so the relationship that you build with that person, I imagine there'd be so much in common, and that the relationship over time and the camaraderie and the things that you can talk about. I believe in talk therapy. I think we call it counseling, talk therapy,
yes.
Whatever. I really believe in that, because two people coming together to talk about the innermost feelings that a person has, I think, is one of the best ways to work through what's going on.
It's vital in most cases, and I try to insist that most of my patients also see one of our psychologists.
Yeah, I'm familiar with her. She's been on our show too, and
Dr. Rothman.
Dr. Rothman, she's wonderful, and I love AgeWell because it is comprehensive care. Everything you need is right there on one site, and I just have to hand it to Hugh Green and the others there who developed AgeWell to be able to treat elders in our area, full person, body, mind, and soul and spirit. So it's a great concept.
Well, I'll tell you that, I practiced solo for a long time. Even while I was working for Baptist, my patients, I could get them to maybe see a psychologist, but the ones that were slipping into dementia needed a lot more.
Yeah.
And it's a very helpless feeling to be a psychiatrist and not have the care that our social workers can give them, that our medical doctors, we have 2 geriatric physicians and a nurse practitioner that are all experts in this. Yeah. And so there's so many things that I can use as an adjunct to my therapy. It's sort of like that book that Hillary wrote a few years ago, It Takes a Village. She was talking about bringing up kids.
Yep.
But it's the same thing with treating someone that's slipping into dementia.
Into dementia or any types of depression, or like we were talking about before, the 2 combined. And I can imagine that would just be a bit challenging, but would take longer time. That relationship would probably have to go, and that treatment, that counseling would probably have to go a little bit longer for that person who's depressed and also has dementia.
It often does, yes, because it's really the relationship itself that becomes valuable, because the patient really can't learn things that are new.
Right.
They've lost that ability. We're going to talk about caregivers later too, but it's just as important for the caregiver. And if the caregiver's not healthy, it's hard to give care.
Yeah, it's really true. And that's one of the things I guess that's been one of the main messages of my show. And I've had to learn to accept my own advice. And it's not been that easy, to be honest with you. But one of the main messages that I've tried to get across in the 7 years that I've been here is, caregivers, you've got to take care of yourself. And I know many of you are tired of hearing me say that. And you say, yeah, right, Toula, when am I going to find the time to do that? You have to, or you will not make it. And we do know from research that 30% of caregivers die before the person they're taking care of. Many times that is due to self-neglect. And if that caregiver is caring for a loved one with any type of dementia like Alzheimer's, that statistic jumps to 40%. And that's a conservative percentage from what I read. And so that's alarming. So let's move right into talking about caregivers and depression. We know that caregivers are at risk, a much higher risk for depression than non-caregivers, along with a bunch of other diseases like diabetes and stroke, unfortunately, and hypertension. But we're going to talk about depression today. And I know that AgeWell does some assessment of their caregivers when they come in, because I've taken it myself. What tips do you offer to caregivers for themselves who you think that might be getting depressed?
Well, they're pretty much the same things we would recommend for anybody. And when you said before that one of the replies you get is, when am I going to find the time? I think that's one of the great things about having the village, having AgeWell, because we have our social workers who are able to put you in touch with the agencies that you need to get some respite, to have somebody to sit with your mom or your dad while you go out and get the exercise that you need, while you do some of the recreational things that you need to do. So, yes, we definitely recommend that they have as regular exercise as possible. And I always recommend that it be in a setting where you join a club,
right,
and you're doing exercise that's supervised by somebody that's not going to let you get hurt, do too much, and that you're doing it with other people, because the camaraderie that you build there and the relationship you build there is very helpful also.
That's therapeutic and healing in and of itself. All of us need to be with people in our lives who care about us, and we care about them. We need that to survive. We've got a lot to cover in the last segment, Dr. Solloway, but we're going to get there. You're listening to Toula's Tips for Caregivers on AM 600 WBOB. We'll be right back. everyone. This is Toula again, and I'm here to tell you about the AgeWell Institute at Baptist Health. They're located in the San Marco area. I've been taking my own parents there for about 2 years now. Dr. Lance, the geriatrician on staff, has done remarkable things for both my parents and for me, the caregiver. They have great information, advice, and resources to help me. Dr. Lance and her team of social workers, dietitians, nurses, therapists, and the pharmacist have been so instrumental in helping me keep my own parents independent and living in their own home where they want to be. If you're looking for someone to either supplement the care that your primary physician is giving to your loved one who's 65 or older, or to perhaps become their primary care physician, I really encourage you to call the AgeWell Institute at Baptist. Their number is 904-202-4243. Again, that's 904-202-4243. Hi, this is Toula with Toula's Tips for Caregivers, and I'm here today to personally endorse Apex Home Healthcare Services. They've been caring for my own parents for about 3 months, so yes, this is a personal endorsement. Did you know that they have a behavioral health program? If your loved one has any form of dementia, like Alzheimer's, they can send their behavioral health nurse to come and help you cope. They can help with communication skills. They can help manage the medication. They can help with diet, all kinds of coping skills. I didn't know this myself, but Medicare does cover the cost of a behavioral health nurse to come out and help you care for your loved one with any form of dementia. When you've got this nurse coming, you also qualify for a certified nursing assistant to come and help bathe, dress, and attend to the other activities of daily living for your loved one. If you're not using Apex Home Healthcare yet, you need to be. Please tune into my show and learn more about Apex Home Care, or call them at 904-425-4202.
Have you read the new book, Love Stories and Timeless Tips yet? It's by our own Toula Wooten with Toula's Tips for Caregivers. Toula is a caregiver too, as well as an expert on caregiving. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle at Amazon.com. The book is filled with touching stories of caregivers taking care of their loved ones. Each chapter has helpful ideas that we all can use. I love that Toula included a Toula's tip with each story. Her message to caregivers is clear. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of your loved one. This is a beautiful book for all caregivers to read, whether you're a part-time, full-time, or long-distance caregiver, or someone receiving care. You should get the book today. Just go to Amazon.com. Search for Love Stories and Timeless Tips by Toula Wooten.
George, I got the job. Thanks, I'm so excited. They hired me on the spot right after the interview. It was that book I bought from Amazon, From the Interview to the Paycheck by Fred Haley. The book really taught me something. It helped me to think about what the boss wants. Then it helped me with answers that show that I can do the job. I can tell they were impressed when I introduced myself. I just followed the simple outline from the Interview to the Paycheck book, and I know I won the job with my first 90 days plan the book recommended. They said no one else had ever been so prepared. You should get the book. It's on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle. It's worth it if you want to get hired. Just search for From the Interview to the Paycheck by Fred Haley. Do it now.
And now let's return to Toula's Tips for Caregivers, brought to you in part by AgeWell Institute at Baptist Health, by Elmcroft Assisted Living and Memory Care, by Apex Home Healthcare, by the AARP, and by Bartram Lakes Brooks Assisted Living. Once again, here's Toula.
Well, welcome back, everyone. My guest today is Dr. Michael Solloway, who is with the AgeWell Institute. He is the medical director there for the Baptist Behavioral Health. He is the geriatric psychiatrist who treats so many older adults, elders, who might be experiencing really a wealth of different concerns. But we're honing in today on depression. We've talked about some of the symptoms of depression, some ways to, some of the causes, some ways to treat it. And we just touched on a little bit about caregivers and depression, because again, we know that caregivers are at such a much higher risk for depression than those who aren't caregivers. If you think you might be yourself in taking care of your loved one, you might be starting to experiencing some of these symptoms that we talked about. Isolation, not doing some of the things that you've always enjoyed doing, reduced appetite, maybe frustration on a more regular basis with the responsibilities that you have, and just this feeling that you can't, it's never going to stop, and maybe feelings of hopelessness.
And irritability.
And irritability, that's a key one for a lot of people, for caregivers, because for so many people, it just doesn't end. You know, the responsibilities can be huge, and they're ongoing, and their day-to-day was for so many people without really let up. And
these are the things we look at when we talk about burnout.
Right. Caregiver burnout is real, and it can lead to depression. And there are ways you can get help. And if there's anything I try to say, caregiver, is please reach out. Reach out to me. Reach out to Dr. Solloway at AgeWell Institute. They have a great team there that can help you with all kinds of things, including finding resources to help you as a caregiver. Through the Caregiver Coalition, I'm always reminding people of the community resources that are available to help you. You don't have to go it alone, is what I'm trying to say. There are people that can help you. And if you think you might be experiencing depression, Dr. Solloway, what's that first phone call they need to make?
To your primary care doctor, to your physician. And very often with depressions that are not terribly complicated, those people can treat them very well with medication.
Right.
I would think, though, that at the same time that your doctor's giving you some medication, reach out to a therapist. Ask your doctor about that. If the medication is not working, if it's complicated, your physician will refer you on to a psychiatrist. But a lot of people are treated by their physician, maybe a therapist, and get well.
Yep. And so there is hope. If there's anything that I want to stress, that with time and the right treatment, depression can lift. It can go away. You are not stuck there.
Exactly.
And that's the message of hope that I want to give. And along those lines, we're going to go to the really hard topic today. We talked about it a little bit before my show. And, you know, I mentioned to you that this topic really breaks my heart. But we know that while older adults in our nation make up about 12% of our population, they account for about 18% of suicide deaths. And we know that the male who is 85 and older, is even at a higher risk for suicide. And I know you see people who have suicidal thoughts.
Yes.
Help me with this.
Well, people that are depressed will almost always eventually think of suicide. And it's not always just suicide. Sometimes they just think, I'd be so much better off if I didn't wake up. They begin to think that my relatives, my loved ones, will be so much better off if they didn't have me as a burden. Those are the thoughts we begin to get. And it doesn't mean that that's a patient that's at high risk for suicide, right. But there is some risk. And so we'll go on and talk about many other things that might increase the risk. And at the highest risk, of course, that's the patient that should go in the hospital.
Right.
But some of the questions that we ask, some of the standard questions that are on scales are really meant to not only prevent depression, but also prevent suicide, but also to prevent unnecessary hospitalizations.
Okay.
So when I talk to a patient about suicide and when I ask a lot of questions about it, I rarely think that they're going to go in the hospital. I'm figuring out what are the strengths and how can we treat you, and is there hopefulness there? And this is a patient that can be treated as an outpatient.
Right. What are some of the questions you ask to determine if you think that person might be suicidal?
Well, you know, we actually use this, the Columbia Severity of Suicide assessment, and there are very specific questions on that. But that's only part of it. The main part is my own evaluation and talking about things like alcohol,
right,
which actually goes down in our elder population. So patients people that die of suicide at younger ages, at least 30% of them have alcohol in their bloodstream. Mm-hmm. In our elders, that's not the case. It's much less than that. So we ask a lot of those questions, but the other thing that's very important on the suicide assessment is, have you attempted suicide before? how many times they've attempted suicide, or have you had suicidal ideation with a plan to do it, or have you started to do it and you stopped because somebody intervened or some other thing happened. So aside from depression, which is obviously the most important indicator of someone that might be suicidal, previous attempts at suicide are the biggest sign.
Yeah, and the highest risk factor, I would think.
Absolutely.
But again, some of those same symptoms that we talked about, feelings of hopelessness, feelings of worthlessness, feelings that you are no longer contributing.
Yes.
That's so important for all of us.
It really is. And I think we were talking about Thomas Joyner, the psychologist at FSU. He's the head of their department, who has written a couple of books on this. And he has a theory about suicide. He talks about his father who committed suicide and got him to really look into this. And he finds that patients that are at the highest risk for suicide are patients that are feeling isolated, like they don't have a group that they belong to. They're not, and secondly, that they're not effective. And I have that in my own practice so often. A patient, generally a man who said, I can't help my wife around the house. I'm no longer a breadwinner. I feel so helpless and hopeless. So not feeling that you have the means, the ability to help and to influence other people, those are two of the most important things. And then the third has to do with our questions about have you attempted suicide before, because Thomas Joyner feels that it is one of the hardest things in the world to do, to have enough to bring up the courage to actually end your life.
Yeah.
It's painful and it goes against all your instincts. Wow. So we look at people that have had a lot of pain in their life and the pain is getting worse, chronic pain, real pain, physical pain, and then the loss of their job and their loss of
spouses and things like that happen later in life. It's a lot of loss. To incur and can be so painful.
Yes.
And I know that all of that is what contributes to our elders taking their own lives. And I know you see this and talk about it every day. I thank you for that work. And, our show's getting ready to end. So if you could say anything to an elder out there that you think might be contemplating it, what would it be?
Well, obviously it would be to seek help.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Tell somebody. See a psychiatrist. See a therapist.
Yeah. And tell your family members.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got people in your life who love you.
Right.
Tell them. They will surround you.
And for the family members, the caregivers, be able to hear that without freaking out.
And no judgment.
No judgment. No. Just seek the help you need.
Right. Life can hurt sometime, and we all are going to hurt from time to time. But if you've got somebody you think is really there, listen with an open heart and get the help. Anything else?
Well, no, just lead the, do the things that common sense would tell you to do. Eat right, get plenty of sleep, get plenty of exercise, and whether you're the caregiver or the patient.
All those things will help you remain healthy physically and emotionally. And again, if you've been listening today and you want to ask a question, you can still call in at 904-222-8255. You've been listening to Toula's Tips for Caregivers on AM 600. Thank you, Dr. Solloway, for your heart and for what you do for elders.
And thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you, and blessings to everyone today.